It's really common for pastors to talk about how we use one English word, love, for 5 different Greek concepts. But we do something like this with the word politics, too. We just don't often realize it. To help us avoid confusion and think a little more clearly and maybe even have better conversations together, let's start by breaking apart 5 different definitions that we usually keep all bundled together into that one word. Let's start with the life of the many. When we're talking about the life of the many, we're talking about the systems and institutions and traditions and rules and norms that give shape and order to our relationship to more people than we could ever actually know personally. The things we share in common with people we'll never actually meet. When we're talking about the life of the many in the US, we might sometimes say civic life, or we use the metaphor, the public square. The second thing we might mean when we say politics is government. Government is a specific set of institutions within the public square that has the authority to make and enforce rules and regulations. Government is one of the institutions that's specifically ordained by God in Scripture for humans to create, use, and maintain for the sake of the common good and human flourishing. And the Bible tells us that government is an institution that will continue to exist when the kingdom comes. Jesus will bear the government on his shoulders, according to Isaiah. But, crucially, the Bible doesn't necessarily endorse a specific style of government between the fall and the resurrection. For everyone except Israel between the Exodus and the exile, the Bible's descriptive when it talks about governmental structures, not prescriptive. The third thing we might mean when we say politics is public policy or policy development. Policies are the specific rules and regulations that governments develop and enforce. In the US, different kinds of policies are developed through different processes, but most of those processes try to strike a balance between allowing elected officials some degree of space to exercise their best discretion and making sure that members of the public have the chance to weigh in on the rules and regulations that will end up affecting us. The fourth thing we might mean when we say politics is power dynamics. And power dynamics exist anywhere that 2 or more people try to relate to one another, or solve a problem together, or reach a goal together. It's what we mean when we say office politics. How do we make decisions or take action as a group? Do we collaborate? Do we compete? Do some people just defer to other people? If so, how do we decide who leads and who defers? And the last of the 5 definitions we're going to look at today is partisan competition. This is a very specific kind of power dynamics centered around who gets the most influence over our policy development. The US developed a 2-party political system after George Washington retired. And for most of the time since then, on the national scale, at any given time, we've usually had 2 major organized groups of people working in government and talking about government. These 2 factions generally compete with one another for favor among the voters and for power over the process of governance. These parties change over time. Sometimes a third one pops up for a few years, but either that third party falls apart or one of the legacy parties falls apart and the new party takes its place. Those are 5 different things that we might mean when we think of something as political. And when we don't keep these ideas separate from one another, we can end up misunderstanding them and misunderstanding ourselves. A lot of us might think that we don't care about politics when the thing that actually turns us off is partisan competition. We feel out of place in the major parties, or we don't like the way that commitment to a partisan tribe has malformed the church.